Good afternoon again. Everyone who was so brave to remain till the end, you're very, very welcomed. I think, like Diana said during the second session, we all are really privileged to be here in this beautiful building at the State Hermitage Museum, talking about art, architecture, digital challenges, etc. So it's really joy that we were able to get together and to have these beautiful talks. So I would like to introduce our experts, our guests and partners in crime, so to say. So my pleasure is to introduce Cyril Vigneron, who doesn't need, I think, today any additional introduction, President and CEO of Maison Cartier, Albert Elbaz, founder of AZ Factory, Jason Bailey, founder of the platform artnorm.com, Nana Dekking, founder and CEO of Iiii, and also a member of the Council of Specialists of the Hermitage Foundation in Amsterdam, and Nadia Taiga, who's executive director of the platform Snark Art. And the final panel of this conference is concentrated around digital space as a resource, as a main battlefield, if you'd like to, and a promise also for future reshaping of the art world. I hope that we will able to talk about new transparency regimes, new understanding of availability, new relationships between, so to say, traditional actors in the art world, experts, collectors, museums and public. How does the digitalization influence the art practice and its distribution? What are the limits of the changes and what arsenal of tools should we acquire as viewers, professionals, curators, etc. And as we do today, the whole day long, before every session, we start our discussions with a short video, with the questions coming from the students. And hopefully during this panel, we will be able to answer at least some of them. Please.
Hello, my name is Polina Shkolarenko. I'm a first-year student at Rapin Academy of Fine Arts. Do you think that in modern world and digital space, the borrowing of cultural elements by one nation from another, one is a negative factor, which destroys the cultural unity, or is it a logical result of globalization, which gives an opportunity for public at large to learn more about people far away? Hello, I'm Ekaterina Sokolova. I'm a student of St. Petersburg State University. Today, the artificial intelligence can do a lot, draw, create music, and even develop a signature style, thus becoming a competitor of a human being. Can we say that the artificial intelligence will play the role of a curator as well in the future?
Good morning. In my opinion, the heritage is very important for following generation of people of all countries. But as we can see from the global point of view, the countries are pushed to implement some multicultural strategies and accept things that haven't been relevant to them. So if we want it or not, the countries are losing their heritage. So my question is there some chance for retention of our heritages in the future? Will they not be lost in time? Thank you.
So as already said, we will try to answer these questions during the panel. If not, we will definitely do it afterwards. So the first speaker will be Cyril, and the first question I'd like to address him is the following. So in one of the interviews, Cyril said that Cartier has been interested in the state of the world since its beginnings, quote. It corresponds naturally to the agenda of this conference. Through digital, we witness the new state, new order of things. How do you perceive the digital shift? What is especially crucial for you when talking about creation, information, and knowledge distribution?
Thank you for this question about how digital influences the world. When it comes to creation, as we come mostly to tangible products, physical, the digital doesn't change that much. However, it can change if we do a special customer order, when the digital tools can really help having constant closeness and interaction between customers and the craftsmen, even if they are far. Otherwise, the creative process when it comes to physical product remains quite the same. What changes more is information and sharing, and also a part of convergence and divergence. So information sharing, meaning there are new ways now that can forward information up to the boutique staff in relationship with their clients in a much, much more convenient way. But on the other side, things in the digital ecosystem are changing so rapidly that what's happening in China and US is different. So the systems to make it happen have to be different. But to me, what has changed most, I think, linked to digital, is the communication part, that the maison and brands have become their own media, but they also have to interact with their clients in a way which become now dual way. Maisons and brands used to do messages that they would convey through media, meaning physical magazines coming once a month, and there would be no feedback loop. But now with digital, social media, everyone has an opinion and everyone wants to be engaged and informed, but also part of the discussion. So it means that both in terms of incarnation and leaders or other brand maison have to come to be part of this conversation directly with ambassadors, but also having direct contact with clients. Also, through education, university, and communities, we also have to interact in a very different way. So digital, in some way, has made the democratization of communication and interaction and dialogues. And that's a very, very positive move.
Another question to Cyril was, so I suppose that one of the most frequently asked questions during this panel will be how the new communities or new social regimes might appear through blockchain platforms, but broadly speaking, the nature, and we are questioning the essence of digital communication itself. So what communicative possibilities were open to you recently in light of, if I may, total digitalization? How do you feel your community now?
So the way the question is raised, I think, is not totally right. There will not be a total digitalization. And if we think about what digital has done, digital has really disrupted the areas that can be dematerialized or where digital is much, much more convenient. So in my young age, you know, the music would come to vinyl records and required a lot of space in the home. And it was quite difficult to move the music physically. And everyone knows who have done some moving, you know, a long time ago, knew the worst part were books and records. And now everything can fit in a mobile phone, and you can carry it with you. So this is very convenient. And if you need some new thing, you just download. It's just immediate. But digital will never replace the emotion of real live concert. When you have a fantastic interpreter coming on stage, and you come there and we all share, and when you have gone to the standing ovation, you know, there is something that cannot be replaced. And that's why concerts are full. And even streaming concerts during COVID confinement are not at all the same. So, same, digital will replace few things that were before because they're more convenient now, but there are other things that cannot be replaceable. And precisely what we're doing is tangible product to express intangible feelings. When you want to express love, when it's something that can express it, but it's not something, a digital message. And there even something we have lost maybe over the years. You know, when you in the past received a written love letter with fragrance, you know, just before opening, there was something so touching. And now, you know, the little email with emoji and heart like this, it's cute. but it will never replace that part. And if you offer a red box, you know, the emotion just before opening the box is about the same as receiving a love letter before even you open it. So this will never be replaced by anything digital. So the world will go digital for what's make it easier, and the rest will need even more the human touch and the tangible products that can support them.
And the very last question, almost personal, would sound, knowing about Cyril's love and addiction to Japanese culture, Japanese craftsmanship, I should ask him about the ways of coexistence of a true craftsmanship, distilled mastery in the reality, which is nowadays defined a lot through digital. Do you still believe in craftsmanship and how the notion of it was transformed recently?
I do, and what I like especially is the digital art, when you can use some computer-assisted algorithm to create something physical. For instance, the work of Joachim Soter is very interesting, to bring on the physical expression something using some computer models, and this allows new forms of art. For the rest, when it comes to video mapping and so forth, there are some part can be very interesting. So some are questioning whether at some point computerized art or artificial intelligence will not replace everything. And I'm not concerned about that. Of course, if you try to ask a machine to learn and then to make the Nocturne from Chopin, the 23rd, 24th, 25th, which he didn't write, probably you can copy and it would work. It's the same for literature. You have things which are beautiful and you can, replicate. You have what we call the train station literature, where you have the same novel over and over. And it's been done in the past already. Even Vivaldi was saying he could write a new concerto faster than the copies could make it, because he had kind of standardized structure. So this has been done already in the past, but this was not really going anywhere. So what was interesting is when an author is inspired by another one and creates something new. When Liszt is inspired by Bach and makes something, and when Liszt is inspired by Paganini, and then when Horowitz takes the Liszt version of Paganini and makes something new. And that's what's very human. So in this case, there would be a continuous part of inspiration and continuously using new form of art than digital and computer can bring. Maybe in the future there will be something when an artificial intelligent computer will invent new forms of music that humans just don't understand, and that the jury of computers will give a reward to the best composed piece by computers for computers, and that will be totally out of our mind. But I don't really care about that. What we care is what's bringing emotion to us and what is really, really, truly human. So the nice part is how to include new forms of art coming from computer to make something that are touching us as humans.
Thank you to Cyril. And finally, we welcome our experts who are kindly all online. And first, Albert Elbaz, who kindly joined this discussion. Albert, the first question I'd like to address to you, it seems that the main topic of this conference synchronizes with your creative path, so to say. So how do you evaluate the relationships between heritage and innovation? How important were these relationships for your recent AZ Factory project? And how important for you was the digital format itself?
Hello, everyone. I think that in the world we're living today, we're very much used or want to be in the place where it's a yes or a no, it's a black or a white, it's a big or a small. And I think that life is not about those extremes. I think that life is about finding the middle without being mediocre. I don't think that it's about just digital or just heritage. I think it's the mix, and it's to find the mix, to find the yin and the yang between algorithm and technology and emotion and sensitivity, and to find that mix between the two. I don't think that it's one or the other. I always said that in order to play heavy metal music, you better know how to play Mozart. I think that it's one of those things that we need to know. We need to know what it was. I think that there is a big difference between being nostalgic or knowing the past. I think that knowing the past is, or knowing the history, it's an important thing. This is our tool, whether we know it from books, from library, or from experience. We have to know what was done in order to decide if we want to repeat or we want to change, we want to create or recreate. I believe that we are in a very interesting place in design, in creativity, and I think in the world, because I think we're going through also a very interesting moment in life, which is COVID-19. And you know that it's a detox year. And I hope it's just a year and not an epoch. But it's a time of clearing. It's a time of accelerating changes. And everybody today is also asking and talking about what's next. And this is always my question, not what's now, but what's next? Where are we going? What will be the next story we're going to talk about? And I always go back, you see, like to history. And I think that I'm more about understanding history, but less about being nostalgic. And I go to what happened 100 years ago after World War I and after the Spanish flu. And there was this big epoch of Les Années Folles. And Les Années Folles were actually at the place, I mean, the center of this era was in Paris, and of course in Montparnasse, where the Fondation Cartier is, and where I work. I'm on the third floor at this amazing building. And we talk about those crazy years, Les Années Folles. But if we go a little bit deeper, I mean, who were those crazy artists? And it was, on one hand, it was Cocteau, and it was Hemingway, and it was Vionnet in fashion. It was Charlie Chaplin in the movie. It was jazz. And more than anything, when I think about all this creativity and all these creative people, they were not crazy, but they were smart. So I think that it's not the crazy year, but I think it is the smart years. And if I can relate for a second and go back to the story of jazz, and what does it mean? I mean, it is a music that you play with no notes. It's a music that you have to have a know-how, but it is a music that you have to use your intuition. It is also about a dialogue. It is not about monologue. It's about hearing each other and playing together. And I think that togetherness is what makes us smart, and this is what makes us move or run further rather than run faster. So everything I'm talking about, and even in the work that we're doing at AZ Factory, it is about tradition, but it's about pushing it forward. It's about, one of the things that it's very, very important, as we all know it in luxury, is to keep the mystery, to keep the dream. So if you have to keep the dream and the mystery, you have to have an industry of secret. But we're living in a world that you don't want secrets anymore. You want transparency. So how do we deal with, one hand, transparency, but on the other hand, to keep that mystery? And again, I'm going back to that beautiful word, which is middle, but never mediocre.
For me, probably the most refreshing moment with the AZ Factory was the fact that the human's presence, the human being's presence, was very visible, very present. It was actually all about a woman who's different, who's contemporary, who needs to move, who needs to be on Zoom during the day and going out during the evening. So in this regard, how do you see the challenges for a contemporary human being, if I may, who faces digitalization, who faces global pandemic, etc., etc.? What is, on your opinion, the most important?
It's a beautiful question that you're asking here. The question was long, but the answer would be a bit longer, I think. In our industry, in the fashion industry, in the luxury fashion industry, we used to actually do shows in front of 200 connoisseurs. And we had to push the boundaries. we have to push our abilities. We had to be extremely creative because we were judged by the fashion judges, by the fashion Supreme Court of judges, so-called the fashion critique. Today we're living a world that is a bit different because we're not doing those shows, but we're doing it differently. Now we're going with the format that is direct to consumer. So it's not the same film, it's a different one. We go directly to the people who are actually going to buy it, that are going to wear it, that are going to touch it, and not the people that are going to talk about it philosophically. So again, what is it that we do and how do we change? In our story with Iiii Factory, we showed, during the Couture Week. And I was really wondering, and we did all together, was it the right time for us or the right format to use or to show this collection during Couture Week? And we were actually talking among ourselves. The thing about couture, that it's about innovation, it's about design, that it's about know-how, that it's about tradition. But the essence of couture is not necessarily only red carpet and big brouhaha, but it's also about innovation, it's about laboratory, and it's about being kind of yourself. Being authentic, being an individual. Therefore, if it's about authenticity and it's about laboratory, we fit in the couture. Now about the human part, I worked with a film company and there were 4 women that were actually working on that project. And I chose this specific production company, because it was for women. And I understood and I knew instinctively that they will do the job that I'm looking for, because it was about women. And then the first day when I was there, I saw in the monitor that they're filming more the faces, more almost like a portrait of a woman. And I'm coming from a fashion school where you have to show the whole shebang, you have to show the whole product. And I didn't understand why they are not using the rest of the clothes in the shoot. And I asked them if they didn't like the clothes, but then they said, no, we like to hear the women. And I thought, bingo, I have something here, that it's not only about a portrait of a woman, but it's more also about listening the voice of women. And we made all these models speak and talk, and we wanted to hear their voices. In the end of the week of this filming, I realized that we don't see always the clothes, but we see the women. We hear their voices. We hear what they have to say. We also try to inject some sort of optimism. And that's why instead of having them walk, we had them dance. So it was about women, about dancing, about optimism, about their voices. And the reaction of the whole world to this project was all about humanity. And I think that at a time like today, where we are, on one hand, we are used to see all the fashion industry in Fashion Week with a pink or a fuchsia cape and a leopard hat. When I see them on Zoom, they're all wearing a black sweater. And the question is, how do we find like the middle again between the two worlds? And our world, or our solution, was to go back to humanity, to forget ego. It's not about us. It's not about trying to show the world how amazing we are, but to try to listen also to women, to their need, to the life that they are living, to the fact that women today are so multifaceted. I think the fact that today the world is changing, women are changing, the relationship between women and the world is changing. And we as fashion designer, we're not only artists that create what we feel like, but we also have to create what we believe people around us need. And that was what we were all about solving problem, about understanding, and about zero ego. That's why I could even do a pajama and a sweatshirt and a t-shirt and a sneaker, because this is all I feel like having now.
But pointy sneaker.
Pointy sneaker.
Thank you, Albert. I'd like to stick to one of your replicas, to one of your statements related to new regimes of transparency, new regime of human cooperation and communication. And our three guests, who are Jason Bailey, Nanda Dekking, and Nada Taiga, are actually creators of blockchain platforms. And they are running these platforms in quite differently, and this is the interesting point. So first I'd like to address my questions to Jason. Jason, so on your opinion, the new media arts, but not only the new media art itself, but also the ways of its distribution, could they change the traditional art infrastructures? If we speak, for instance, from a museum perspective, being in a museum, how it will influence the exhibition programming? Is it able to reshape museum conservation, restoration regulations, etc.? So, what's your perspective on that?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me. And I would say that one of the big mistakes that people make is they assume that there's a zero-sum game. So Albert talked about this a little bit, and not going to the extremes. I would describe it as we're going to bring in new experiences that don't necessarily have to displace our old experiences. So the two things that I missed most during COVID, first, sadly, I've learned that I'm a Starbucks addict and I miss my coffee when they were shut down. And the second is I miss museums, because museums are like my temple. They're like my church. That's where I go to feel good. And not having access to those has been difficult. But I think it would be hard to find someone who's more excited about digital art than I am in these new digital art spaces. So it's not that you can only have one or the other. And I think what we're seeing right now, in particular in the last 2 months, there's an explosion in digital art collecting around something called NFTs, or non-fungible tokens. And while a lot of people are wondering, is it hype, and is it just gonna pass over? Are these just like, Beanie Babies or something like that? I tend to think that it's a little bit more like the early days of the internet. So we're seeing this new experience where we all agree, because partially of the blockchain, that digital property can be something that you can own. It doesn't have to have a material existence. And when you shift from physical to digital, the ability to buy, sell, and trade things just goes a whole lot faster. And you lose some things in that process, like nuance, in detail and some thoughtfulness. But you gain some things too. I think you lower the barriers to participation, and we're starting to see a larger number of people that maybe wouldn't traditionally think of themselves as artists participating. So how does that impact museum experiences? I think there's two things. One, we shouldn't forget that before COVID, I always look to what's the younger generation going to do, because that's where things are going to go. And before COVID, we had things like Meow Wolf, and I think they were starting to build out Super Blue. So for people that don't know, the talking track was, look, younger people really want experiences. They actually value experiences more. That's what the surveys show. They want to be around each other. They want to be able to take the Instagram photo to show that they were at the, Yo-Yo Kasuma, exhibition. And I think now with everything shut down, people are forgetting that trend is still there, and it's probably built up more than ever, right? People want to get out and be around each other and experience these things. So I think museums need to move away from unidirectional communication, where you come and you just absorb. And they need to build experiences where people can feel like it's bi-directional, where they have some role in what's happening. They want to be immersed. They want to have some sort of interactivity. So that would be the first thing. And then on the digital side, while we're in COVID, and I think some of these things will continue post-COVID, museums, part of their role is to be the steward, or the person that actually owns the physical piece that we couldn't, not everyone can have the Mona Lisa in their house, right? So there was a reason for us to fly somewhere or to go, because that physical piece existed there. But that's not all that museums do. They provide context and they provide education, right? So I think while we're all locked in our homes and there's sort of this new digital world of art coming in, museums should help to the public to understand and interpret what are these new works. what's their heritage, what's their lineage. Too often people look at digital work, and because they're afraid of computers and digital things, they assume that everything just came out of nowhere. But there's actually a pretty rich history of digital art going back to the 60s that's an extension of what happened prior to the 60s. And I think museums should invest in hiring folks that can help educate the public so that they can understand where this continuity comes from. And with everything in our lives becoming increasingly digital, we can no longer, as cultural institutions and cultural experts, just pretend like that's a scary thing that we put in the back. We need to stand up front and help people understand and interpret what the cultural value of these new things are.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we are witnessing since kind of long time ago the radical shift of exhibition policies. So, and it was especially evident during the last Venice Biennale, curated by Ralph Rugoff, with the truly prophetic title, May We Live in Interesting Times. And they were presented many art practices based on machine learning, AI, etc., etc. So the most spectacular works were probably by Chinese duo Sun Yan and Peng Yu, Hita Stel, Jun Raffman, Yang Cheng, etc. So they pieces were functioning in physical reality, so they were taken into consideration, so to say, viewers' physical body or physicality, broader speaking. In this regard, how do you see the perspectives of real exhibition history of digital art?
Yeah, so I think this speaks a little bit to that interactivity that I was talking about. I think there are quite a few misunderstandings around AI and machine learning and what those things are and what they mean. Fairly often, I think people think there has to be some sort of robotics component combined in with AI and ML. And I think that's because we have a hard time with the conceptual elements of what AI actually is. But I do think there's an opportunity for museums in particular. There's the sort of the dominant AI art that's been being made in the last 4 or 5 years uses this thing called GANs, and I won't get into it, but it's generative adversarial networks. And it produces these, 2D images, and we don't need a museum to see these things. We're in front of screens all day. But when an artist has an idea that extends into the physical and maybe has a dialogue between the viewer and the creator, museums can still be those physical spaces that host that kind of work and actually support it. It's often the case that physical work requires more funding, in order to house it and sort of create it. So I would say that, and also going back to the question that I think one of the students said up front around, will AI or ML sort of replace humans, or do we have to worry? This is sort of part of the a sticking point for me, or a thing that I like to clarify, which is that, so I've worked not as an AI scientist, but in AI companies for a better part of 10 years, and that's sort of my area of research. And I think it's important to know that most of the tasks that are being automated are actually the less creative ones. So AI is not quite as advanced as we all fear. And what we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years is that it'll replace sort of the mundane, less creative tasks, which will actually put a premium on the folks that have creative training and creative backgrounds, because those are precisely the things that machines can't replace, right? So we're actually, rather than seeing creatives be replaced by machines, we'll actually see them lifted up in a premium on the work that they bring, because that's the work that's hard to replace or replicate. And then people will point and say, well, what about these artworks that I see in these magazines and newspaper stories that say like robots and AI are taking over? But you have to remember that those robots, or the more likely AI, which doesn't have to have a physical manifestation, are all programmed by humans. And the only time that the work is actually interesting is when the human intervenes in the process and actually chooses what material is being used to train the model, and actually can adjust the model itself and can curate the work that's coming out of the model. So, sure, machines can do things on their own. They always have been able to, but the output is rarely anything that someone would consider art. It's, AI and ML are at this stage, in my opinion, simply just another tool or an instrument that humans can use in order to create new things. And they're sort of wondrous and amazing things, right? So my suggestion would be to go and learn more about AI and ML if you're afraid of it, and see how sort of these new, artists are using this as a tool of our times in order to reflect what's going on around us. And I think the more you learn and understand about AI or how artists are using it, the more exciting it is and the more you'll want to participate and the less afraid you'll be.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for these precious insights. So the next two questions I would address to Nadia Taigam, who is running another blockchain platform. And my first question is related to speaking generally, how the contemporary platforms change the essence of private and public ownership. Seems that it's going to be a crucial issue also for museums collecting.
The blockchain art platforms open the door to the democratization of art, community ownership, interactivity, and new forms of art. To acquire an artwork becomes a public act of art appreciation or speculation that we still see quite a lot on the crypto art market. But there is no way anymore for the collector to hide collection in his private house, because art becomes available to the public view. Everyone can see this artwork, but only I own it. This is the new mindset of the collector, and it makes collector as a proactive figure on the art scene. We also can see how the museums function as a sanctuary of art, shifting towards public and community hands right now. For example, our artwork, 89 Seconds, atomized by Eve Sussman, that is based on her previous artwork, 89 Seconds at Alcazar, that is in the permanent collections of MoMA, Whitney Museum, and many others. Of course, for artists, it's very prestigious to be at the museum collection, but it limits the visibility of artwork. So we changed it. We divided 10 minutes video into 2,304 tokens and sold each token for $100. For now, the video is in the hands of over 300 collectors with total estimate of the artwork over $200,000. And each collector has an access to the full video and can schedule public or private screening with interactive elements. The same logic we applied to the Old Testament video by Tommy Hartung, dividing 1 hour 39 minutes video into 25 chapters. So with all that, the collector not only can bring the museum into his house, but also own the museum level artwork and exhibit it. Moreover, everyone on the digital platforms can become a curator or gallery by selecting NFTs that he likes and exhibit them. We can see with recent sales records of CryptoPunks and Beeple, the professional world that didn't appreciate crypto art seriously before started to follow the choice of this audience. So there is a hope. Museums will begin to buy and exhibit NFTs collections and find the way how to communicate with this new audience and become a part of the community. It's very important in an era of democratization of art we live now.
Another question would relate to the artist himself and the artistic production. So, and I was wondering how the presence of the artist on the blockchain platform change, or what does it mean for an artist to be presented on the blockchain platform?
Snark Art works with both galleries and artists. For galleries, of course, it is an opportunity to get access to the completely new crypto audience, young, brave, and wealthy. Mainly, this audience doesn't know much about contemporary art yet, but they are actively buying, learning, and they are very fast. It's a very interesting audience for galleries and artists, and it's very dynamic development is there. What is for artists, we have created the first NFTs with Ilyana Milyakabakov, Kendall Gears, AS Plasaf, Loris Griot, and some other established artists, as well as with many young artists. For all of them, besides the diversification of artworks, there is a high interest in experimenting with blockchain as a new medium. The artist can create a new type of generative art, work, interactive piece of art, community-owned work, involve a buyer as a co-creator of the final work. It was impossible without blockchain for artists to create such new forms of art. And it was impossible for collectors to own digital art and to be in charge of showing the artworks. So it's a very dynamic and very interesting and attractive field for all galleries, artists, and collectors.
Thank you. So happy to introduce you to our next speaker, Nana Dekking, whose biography is quite amazing. And I can tell you, so when I first approached Iiii, I got the similar feeling when reading any artistic attempt like of the Universal Project, you know? So it's like starting from La Divina Commedia, like Comédie Humaine of Balzac. And it seems that digital era gives us a new chance for this type of universality, if you want. So in case with Iiii, the basic principle might be entitled as transparency. Why this idea is so crucial for you, also in light of your previous professional experience being the head of TEFAF, etc., etc. So why the transparency is that crucial in case of new digital platform?
Well, thank you for including me. It's maddening that we're not together, because listening to the group, we would have had the most incredible dinner tonight in St. Petersburg. Very interesting group. Thank you for including me. Well, in the end, I'm much more boring than you just described me. Yes, I'm indeed from the art market. I've been extremely lucky that I've been able to work at the highest echelon of the market for many years. And the only thing you learn when you work in the business for a long time is what defines, especially if you work in the fields of collectibles or artworks, or whether it's an expensive watch or an expensive bottle of wine or an artwork, is what actually defines the price. That has been my business. I had to explain to people what defines the price of the artwork. And I found it really tough, because defining the price, I could, because I'm one of those idiots who actually read the books and who wants to be really knowledgeable. And I'm also one of those guys who wants to learn from people who use different kind of technology. In the days that I was a dealer, not technology that we're talking about now, blockchain, I will definitely talk about it later. But I would go to Florence, and I would go to the Opificio delle Pietre Dure, which is the best restoration laboratory in the world, when I was actually in charge of selling a major Italian old master artwork, to learn from different skill sets. I've seen an artwork going through a Siemens CAT scan. I can only tell you how much more information that gives you than a subjective restorer who's paid by the marketplace to say something about that artwork, because two different people would come up with different definition. One will say the artwork is in a stable condition. Well, I would stay away from anything in a stable condition. And another person would say it's in great condition. It says nothing. The Siemens CAT scan tells me something, and I learned a lot from being close to people who believed in that kind of non-invasive technology, because you also don't want to touch the artwork. So when I got introduced by the whole idea of blockchain, which came out of the whole environment of one of my biggest clients, who happened to be one of the co-founders of SAP, which is a technical product, is that there is such a technology where you can actually make information unalterable, and you can give it a timestamp. And then with my knowledge, not tech knowledge, but just simple knowledge about a marketplace and what actually convinces people to pay high prices, I just looked at the due diligence processes that I'd been involved in and which I think could have been improved. That's the famous transparency, right? I think the transparency is not everybody needs to know everything. I wouldn't necessarily like anyone to go through condition report of my artwork. Another huge advantage of blockchain technology, all the information is hashed. It can not be more protected than the information that's actually stored on the blockchain. So I just looked very closely to due diligence processes. It's about scarcity. It's about authenticity. And authenticity is extremely, extremely complicated because we talk about digital repositories as if any digital repository can be trusted. Well, we've learned over the last 4 years in the United States of America that digital information cannot necessarily be trusted. And it can be an alternative reality. So what do you do with that information? You find the people who are independent and you make them sign off on that information, which is a cryptographic signature. Sorry, I know, I see you're trying to break in, but this is my favorite subject.
Question that exactly relates to authenticity, the Institute of Expertise and Experts. And I think this is the thing that differs Iiii from many other platforms. And it seems that this Iii's activity remains in sort of saying a more traditional domain, if you want, but actually I find it super fruitful, and this Institute of Expertise is very, very present, and again the entire logic is very transparent. So you trust and you insist on the expertise, on the eye and experience of concrete experts, so to say, but they are incorporated into the platform. So what perspectives, but really perspectives of expertise, do you see in light of digital possibilities?
Well, let's face it. If you look at what we unfortunately have to call traditional art, I'm a huge believer in digital art and NFTs and the whole thing. I think it's such a waste of time to talk about it in the sense as if it's art or not. So let's just incorporate it as art as well. But if you look at the more traditional art, you are more dependent on expert to sign off on information. But I'm also not that naive that I believe every expert. If you look at a catalog resonate committee, we all know what happened to catalog resonates over the last 5 years. People don't necessarily trust the information because catalog resonate providers have gone through so much litigation that the statements they make are actually not that informative anymore about the authenticity of an artwork. So yes, you still would need for traditional artwork, let's say a Monet, you would still need the certificate if it is there of the artwork. I would say without the certificate, don't even touch it. But these days, you would also look for independent information, like has the work been written about by scholars, has the work been exhibited? And I believe all that information, if you talk about multi-million-dollar artworks, should be signed off upon. Hold people accountable in that whole chain of trust. The beauty of what we've spoken up, well, Jason brought up the NFTs. The beauty of an NFT is that all that information is stored. It's there. It's a smart contract. You can look at all the information. And that's what I try to recreate for traditional artworks as well. There is no reason not to store that information and make it immutably linked to that artwork, to the record of that artwork. But an NFT follows the rules of the traditional art. Where did I look to when I was together with my colleagues at Sotheby's doing the valuation on a collection? We would look at scarcity, authenticity, who else than just the catalog resume has seen this artwork? Has it been at the Metropolitan Museum? Has it been at Musée d'Orsay in Paris? All that information you incorporate when you try to come up with the value of an artwork. The beauty of an NFT, they made it scarce because it's unique. It's a unique set of information. There are not two NFTs the same. Different with digital art. The digital artwork, that's what Iiii did. We actually could make digital art more scarce by creating an additional hash to all that information in the blockchain, which then made it unique, which an NFT already is. So I look at new kind of art, and I even look at what Albert just said. The beauty of an haute couture dress or the beauty of a jewel it's all about the same thing. What do you want to prove? And I'm unfortunately not an artistic man. I love to hear Albert talk about the beauty of the model and how important the model can actually be in a relationship with the dress she's exhibiting, to say it in a not very flattering way to the model here. But it's all about the same thing. Is it unique? Is it scarce? Which creativity has gone into that? And all that information can actually be recorded and can be stored. And the beauty is, if it's stored and it's in the blockchain and it's accessible either to the public or certain elements only accessible by the owner of the artwork who has the key to encrypt the information, and maybe some other people like the insurance company or the financial institution the owner is related to, that would be such a big move forward. And it is already, because we're doing it. And what we find out is that especially collectors themselves and financial institutions are very much interested in recording this information or have it recorded by us.
Thank you, Dana. Thanks a lot. So talking about digital and communication, we cannot ignore our online viewers, our guests who joined this conference online. So a couple of questions, I suppose, to you guys, trying to maintain the interest of our online viewers.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for your amazing speeches. I would like to ask one question. There is too much information right now. Actually, we are overwhelmed with the information, and especially during this pandemic time, we got access to even more information. And while we can't go to the museum, while we can't go to see a live performance, we can access this online, and even much more. We can travel from American Museum to Japan, to Europe, like everywhere, and see, experience art, etc. So my question is how to find the right balance between staying very open to the world, especially if you're an artist or if you're a creator, and to stay focused and true to yourself, because this format, which from time to time we all together experience, it's I think what can really distract us and stop from creating something really meaningful.
Jason?
Yeah, sure. I think there's an intersection here with one of the questions that one of the students asked up front, which is this idea of, do we lose something when ideas travel, and there's so much information going on. Are we at risk of losing sort of our local culture or our local heritage? And I just feel very strongly that ideas get stronger when they travel, right? So the further ideas travel, it's almost like a forge. The more, other cultures they have to face, the stronger they get. The reason why we have things like advertising, or people pay to get their voices out there, or companies pay to get recognized, is because things are stronger when more people know about them, right? So if I stay in this room all day, I'm going to be limited to my own thoughts. If I leave this room, I'll have the benefit of access of sharing my thoughts and receiving my wife's thoughts. If I go out to the neighborhood, so with each step outside of my country, each time that my ideas travel further, I think they get stronger, and I get better information back. So I think what we need, to your point about too much information, are stronger filters, right? So you think about, why has Google been so successful? And I think it's because they took this crazy wild west of websites and they tamed it down to a single field on a white screen, where you can use that as a filter to navigate the information that you want to get to. So yeah, we've been, as a society, we've been really excited about big data for the last 10 years, maybe too excited, because the average person doesn't know how to navigate big data and doesn't have the tools to make sense of it. So I think we need to increase the filters of how we deal with sort of this overwhelming amount of data. And I would say that I don't see it as a threat to existing local cultures and practices. I think those things need to travel far and wide. The more people that know about them, the more that they actually exist, and the stronger they can become, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to add to Jason, because the beauty of art is that it is in itself already a filter to information. I agree, there's way too much information. Do I really want to, on Tuesday, do I want to go and listen to yet another curator in a museum, cocktails with this or that curator? Not necessarily, but if you look what I just said, if you look at all the news and the credibility of the news, whether how much news is out there that's not necessarily true, art can be a great filter. I'll keep it really short, but what we've done with Iiii, which to my opinion was so meaningful, is the former administration, as we know here at the Mexican border, they would separate children from parents as a way to disincentivize people to actually cross the border with the United States, which is cruel, this is inhumane, and shouldn't be happening. So you can read a lot of information about it. But a few artists in America came up with the idea, 100 artists, to create art memorializing that moment that the kid was disconnected from the parent. And then all of a sudden, blockchain technology can add such a layer of credibility, which I think is the kind, we all want to look, there's so much information, we want to try to learn where do I find credible information. And why is it credible here? Because everybody can sign off. And as you already know, I'm very keen on people signing off on information, because then you know who said what about the information. So here's the artist who signs off on the authenticity. But it's also the story of the child that's being recorded and becomes immutably linked to that artwork. So I think art is a great filter. And even if you don't apply blockchain technology, look at information about art tells you also a lot about what's happening in the world around us. Look at artistic people, whether it's couture changes. Sorry, I'm talking for you here, Albert. You know that better than anyone else, but couture changes with the whole political environment, economic environment, and art as well. So I actually look much more at art and listen to artists or creative people since COVID started than I did before. I think it's a great filter.
Can I also add something about
one more question, right?
Yeah, and can I ask to Albert, when you are stopping yourself, particularly from adding extra pictures on your mood board?
Can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear it.
When you're stopping yourself from adding extra pictures on your mood board, when you're stopping yourself from consuming the information?
First of all, I'm very moody, so I don't really need a mood board. To start with. For 5 years, I stopped doing fashion, but it doesn't mean that I stopped creating. I think that I did the best creation when I was actually not working, because I found out that boredom is actually the essence of creativity. This is when you create the best, when you're really bored and you're starting to meet yourself and you are not like trapped into one bored and boring meeting after another. This is something that I found out. And you know what I did? I've done 5 years of teaching, because not that I wanted to teach or I could teach anything, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to understand what's next. Because in our métier, they always tell you that we have to hire people that are 14 years old because they know better and the CEO should be 21. And all of a sudden you start to think to yourself, what is happening to the rest of the world? And what I found out is that there is an amazing and beautiful generation out there. They are beautifully inside out. First of all, they don't eat junk food anymore, so they are much more better looking. But the second thing, they are much more into ideology. They understand things. They are more intelligent than we ever been. Now, what made it is information. But I do believe that when there is overload and overdose of anything, but especially here we talk about information, it makes you dream less. And I think that as a creative, sometimes you have to forget everything that you know and to start from scratch with a blank page, because sometimes to go with everything that you know can actually make you recreate. And creativity is about create and not recreate what other people did. And as Picasso said, the best artists are the ones who don't copy, but the ones who are actually stealing. And this is when you start to change. This is where you have to make your own interpretation. And I do believe, and I do think that it's amazing that the House of Cartier is doing this conference today, which is about education, and it's about students. And in my head, you see, I think it's amazing and it's new that it's happening. And I think that education is actually to make everything more clear and more transparent. I also think that in a world of today where everything is global, in the end of the day, we human beings, you, all of us, we're only universal. I think that we are all going through phases that we find out, and we have to find out even more, that technology is not here to kill tradition. Technology is not a dream killer. Technology is here to make it easier for us and to make us think in a different way and to find solution. And it's not a bad word, you know, to know that you have to think about people, about prices, about needs. And this is what creativity means to me today. And it's much more difficult to create. And I'm going back to the middle, because middle doesn't mean be mediocre. I always said that to be extremely commercial is easy. To be extremely crazy, it's even easier. But to find the middle, the piece of cloth or the piece of art that you want to have in front of you, and to wake up every morning and enjoy it, and not to put it in the safe so the value will go up. That's what art is for me. Thank you.
I think we couldn't I think we couldn't find better master of roll-ups and conclusion, because we are run out of time, and now we are kind of need to make a roll-up or conclusion, but I think no one could formulate this better than Albert, so thank you for doing my job actually. Hopefully that this panel demonstrated somehow that all the winds of change somehow converge on human being, on our sensitivity and sensibility regimes and contemporary way of living, and hopefully it resonates quite a lot with the Maison Cartier aesthetic and ethic code. So happy to give over to Janina to conclude it officially. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. It's been quite a journey, and now it's time to wrap up. And I have some takeaways to share with you guys. It's obvious that the human role in art is paramount, and we should embrace digital, as synergy of both can create this magic, shaping our inspiring future. I believe that art and culture is a universal language which unites all of us, regardless anything, be it generation or geography. Let's cherish, let's preserve these values, which is a true living heritage, which empowers us to mark a new creative milestone together. By the way, together was the most popular words of this conference, I believe. Thank you very much for following us. From our big international team curated this cross-generational conversation. It was Cartier Art Dialogues from beautiful St. Petersburg Hermitage Museum. Thank you.